Make your next move with American Express Business Platinum. You'll get 5 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Plus, enjoy access to the American Express Global Lounge Collection. And with the welcome offer of 150,000 points, your business can soar to all new heights. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-platinum. Amex Business Platinum. Built for business by American Express.
I'm not quite sold on the supernatural element, but there's so much going on for such a short runtime, and it's very entertaining and kind of like a fascinating insight into young people communicating.
It's no mean feat to pull off a movie and tell a story purely by tabs on a computer. We should be talking about it a lot more, and we should be talking about it in the way that we talk about paranormal activity.
Because it sounded a bit shit, but it wasn't.
Kobe did message me saying, "Are you sure you didn't mean searching the John Cho one that everyone says is really good?" And I was like, that is really good, but that's not the one I meant.
Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Flixwatcher podcast. I'm joined by Ben.
Hello.
Helen.
Hello.
And James.
You asked me back, thank you.
Always. Everyone's welcome back. And we're going to be talking about Unfriended.
Thank you, as always, to the mighty people for the mighty, mighty tunes. And thanks to Ben from Rockwood Audio for his awesome editing skills.
Please do remember to write a review and rate us on Apple Podcasts and anywhere you can do where you listen to the podcast, because it really does help us.
And you can join in the conversation with us on Twitter
at FlixWatcherPod and on Instagram
at Flixwatcher. Hello film fans, welcome to Flixwatcher podcast. Joining us remotely today we have Ben and James. If you would like to say hello and tell our listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do, please.
So I'm Ben Travis. I am a film journalist. I work for Empire magazine, mostly on the website. So if you read Empire's online news stories, most of that is probably me. And yeah, it's lovely to be on Flixwatcher. Kobe and I recorded an Empire podcast a couple of weeks ago, all about Hamilton. I say a podcast. It was 2 podcasts that lasted about 3 hours each. So yeah.
Wow.
I've strapped in for a pod marathon here.
No, we'll keep this nice and tight and concise. Don't worry. We've got control here. We've got control. Don't you worry.
There was no control on that Hamilton podcast. It went and it went and it went. But yeah, lovely to be here. Thanks for asking me on.
No problems. Thank you for joining us. And who are you sat there in front of a picture of Be More Keanu? Sorry, a light box of Be More Keanu.
Yeah, when it gets a bit darker as the evening goes on, I might switch it on for a little bit of special effects vibe. Yeah, hi, I'm James King. I'm back on the Flixwatcher podcast. I was first here, I think about January, February time of 2020, talking about John Wick 3. And since then, I've gone even deeper into the life of Keanu Reeves, which I'm sure I'll talk about at some point. But yeah, I'm a film critic and writer, mainly on the radio and TV, and happy to be back. Thank you so much.
No problems. Well, let's go into the Keanu a bit now. Why Keanu? You've written a book, Be More Keanu. This is your second book. What was your first book called?
The first one was called Fast Times and Excellent Adventures, which was a history of the 80s teen movie, which included Keanu. He was in there towards the end, 1989, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And that was straight, really. That was a history book. It was a big brick of everything you ever wanted to know about 80s teen movies book. And for my own sanity, but also I think for the sanity of readers, I wanted to write something a bit more light and a bit more easy to read, but uplifting. God, we could all do with that. And I think Keanu Reeves, I'm a long-time fan of him, and he's probably the only A-list star I can think of who fits into a kind of self-help book, whose lifestyle, whose films, whose beliefs, whose quotes actually make up a self-help book. And that's what I've put together. And I think that actually, it started out light. It became a bit more grown up, I suppose, than I thought it would be. It sort of is like a self-help book, which I didn't really expect when I started it. But, I genuinely believe, as much as it is a joke, I genuinely believe that he does some amazing things and believes some amazing things, and that actually being more Keanu isn't the worst idea in the world.
No, I think as we record this, it's September 2020. Presidential election in the US is impending. This is the midst of a horrible time in the world. And I think if everyone was a bit more Keanu, I think generally everyone's life would be a bit happier. What do you guys reckon, Helen, Ben?
Totally. I mean, we're talking Keanu and not John Wick Keanu, right? Because if we were all a bit more John Wick Keanu, the world would be in one hell of a state. But
that's only if you killed his dog or stole his car.
Which clearly none of us would ever do.
Well, okay, we're here talking about your choice of film, Ben, which is Unfriended. Can you tell us why you chose it and give us a synopsis in a minute or less?
I can. So I chose Unfriended partly because I've never seen it and I've been meaning to get around to watching it for quite a while. And the thing that tipped me over the edge was the arrival of Host, which is this year's really buzzy Zoom horror. So a horror film that takes place all in the space of a Zoom call. And actually, this 2014 film Unfriended, it's one of the Blumhouse horror films, sort of did this a few years back. It's a Skype call. It's a slightly different type of internet video call technology, but it is a bunch of people on a Skype call. The whole film plays out that way. You view it through the computer screen and kind of like Searching, which also has a similar producer. Deals out these twists and these revelations all through information that you see on the screen, the conversations between people on this Skype call. So the setup is that it begins with an online video of student Laura Barnes committing suicide, and we find out that that's an event that happened 1 year ago. And on the anniversary of her death, a group of students from the same school, led by Laura's once best friend Blaire, are on a Skype chat together, and they find themselves haunted and harassed by a mysterious, vengeful entity that won't leave them alone.
It was a spooky setup, and it's quite... We're recording this on Zoom now, which is all, makes it a bit eerie.
I know. There's a fifth person on this call, and no matter what I do, they won't leave the chat.
Dude, get off. Well, I'm going to go throw it to James and Helen first. What were your guys' thoughts on this as a concept, and did it kind of stick the landing for you guys? Helen?
So I was confused for a second and thought this was the Zoom film, and then it was like, it can't be the Zoom film because that literally came out and the timings were not allowed. So I'd never heard of this, although... I think maybe I'd heard of the concept, and it's very, 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 very modern in terms of. I was watching it thinking, I'm one of those people who basically, like when horror had a bit of a revamp about 10 years ago, and all these sort of people who grew up on classic horror went, we're not getting involved in this. This isn't proper horror. I sat there and thought, I'm one of those people now. I was actually quite surprised by it. I thought it was going to be terrible, but there was a lot that I did enjoy about it, even though some of the execution wasn't quite so good. But it's a fascinating idea, and just to watch a film on your laptop where you're basically like the voyeur into people's laptops and their notifications popping up and how many tabs they have open and all kind of the Skype ringtones and everything was quite entertaining for its 90-minute runtime.
Good short runtime for you. James, what are your thoughts? Have you seen this before?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, because when I heard that we were talking about Unfriended, I thought, I remember that name, but I've never seen it before. And then I watched it and remembered I had seen it before. But that's how little impact it made on me, is that I couldn't even remember whether I'd seen it before. But then I thought, what a fool I've been, because I loved it. And I don't remember liking it that much at the time. And I suspect I saw it at a critic screening, and I suspect that I was watching it with perhaps slightly more uptight film watchers who were, like Helen said, who were that kind of snooty, this isn't proper horror. And maybe at the time I just felt, that I couldn't really admit to liking it. But watching it now, on Netflix in my own front room, I was like, this is amazing. What I loved about it is that it's certainly for the time, but even now, actually, even all these years later, it feels so excitingly told. I mean, it really was a bold move to tell a story like that. And it really captured how young people, as I said, they still do, but at the time it was more of a new thing, how young people communicated with each other, high schoolers talked to each other, that they would just have, a tab open all night and just chat to each other all night, and you could be doing other things. Once somebody would be reading a book or texting someone, and they'd just be on the screen while the others were doing stuff. And there wasn't ever really that sort of end to a conversation. The whole evening just went on and on. And I thought that was really revolutionary, actually. And I don't know if we give it enough credit. Whereas we do give Blair Witch Project credit as the, arguably the founding film in the found footage genre, and Paranormal Activity and what that did for found footage. And really, this was sort of the new way of making a found footage movie, rebooting that whole found footage idea, which had really become, such a cliche. And I suppose it doesn't have the longevity of found footage, and there have only been a handful of other films since done in this style. I think they call it Screen Life, don't they? And like Ben said, I think it's the same producers of all of them, so it's their thing, and it hasn't really spread to lots of other filmmakers. But for the time, I think it worked brilliantly. It's no mean feat to pull off a movie and tell a story purely by tabs on a computer and, little windows and Skype calls and things. That takes a lot of choreography to be able to get that right.
When I first heard about the concept of this film, because I do remember it coming out, I just thought it sounds a bit too high concept. And a lot of times when I hear about a high concept film, the idea is kind of good for half an hour, and then it kind of dies a death on its, dies on its own sword. And I don't think this did that. I don't think it really stuck the landing, but I think it was a lot better throughout the majority of the runtime than I thought it was. So I give it a lot more credit than it's due. So I look forward to watching Host and look forward to watching Searching as a result. A lot of people said they were both great films. I think this was reviewed less well so maybe by James. Maybe I saw your review and thought, no, let's not watch it. But it was good fun. And what I think, to be honest, the scariest thing for me is this how teenagers communicate these days, and just sit in front of the screen for like hours and have I like having many tabs on my screen, but they were texting each other, the boyfriend and girlfriend were texting each other, they had the Skype chat on, and then they're going in between Facebook at the same time. And I was just like, I can't even do this. This is hurting my head.
That felt more natural to me. This felt a bit more my boiled. I have to say, I don't tend to do like big Skype calls with a bunch of people. That already feels a bit outdated. I don't think people really use sort of Skype anymore, even in the sort of few years since the film came out. But that notion of them switching between all sorts of different social media, and the even right from the very beginning of the film, it starts with a YouTube video and then it goes to the Skype call. And then I really like the way that you then see the text messages popping up on the screen, that you're seeing different levels of conversation involving different layers of people, and the storytelling. I think the reason it doesn't get boring, the reason why the gimmick doesn't really wear off, is because they found a way to tell the story, to reveal certain bits of information in certain ways, in a certain order, through the use of technology in a way that's really smart. That I think it doesn't necessarily get that much credit, because Searching, which is a John Cho thriller, which has a similar sort of vibe where it's all through the computer screen, and it's him finding out about this sort of other life of his daughter that he never knew she had. That got it didn't do a huge amount of business, but it got really well reviewed, and it got a lot of praise for the way it told its story. And Host is really rightfully getting a lot of praise this year. But I don't think I think a lot of the things that those two films do really well also are done really well in Unfriended, in a way that it doesn't quite get the same recognition, really.
Where were because this is Blumhouse production, and as someone who's not typically traditionally a horror fan, anything that has a Blumhouse kind of steel on it, I'm interested in, because they do put interesting spins on things. Creep, Invisible Man, Get Out, they, with their low budget, get good ideas and put them on screen in interesting ways. So is that, I don't know, should they be credited for it all?
I think Blumhouse definitely get a chunk of the credit. I have a real soft spot for them. For me, they make really good, largely very unpretentious horror films. I think we're seeing a real boom at the moment in great, but like prestige horror films, art house horror films. So many of those super great. But you go and see a Blumhouse film and you know that generally their hit rate is very good. It's going to be popcorny. It's going to be teens shrieking, as a lot of horror films should be. But they do have a lot of playfulness in the way that they sort of tell certain stories or which stories are told, because they work on these super low budgets. They often give young filmmakers a chance to make their first film or one of their very early films before they're then going to go on to bigger projects with bigger budgets. But because horror is really bankable at the box office for the most part, they know that they can make a bunch of money off these very small budget films, and often including, as you say, these really great high concepts. So it definitely feels like a Blumhouse film to me, and I think it's emblematic. They'd been going for a couple of years at that point, but it was still fairly early on in the sort of rise of Blumhouse. And I think it's films like this that really helped it make its name.
That's what I was thinking, was that the reasons it maybe didn't hit the mark as much is because Blumhouse wasn't as established as it is now. And Helen, we've had a few. We've had The Purge, we've had Get Out. We were supposed to do Creep, which was never recorded. Where do you sit on Blumhouse in general, Helen? You're more you're the horror person in this podcast.
Yeah, so I'm kind of a big fan, because they sort of brought us Paranormal Activity and then the sequels and Insidious and The Purge and sort of all that. So I'm quite game for a lot of those films, and I don't mind their sequels because some of them might not quite hit the mark of the original, but they tend to come at the sequels with a slightly different way or do something a little bit interesting. And even with this, there is a sort of sequel, Dark Web, but I could kind of see them making more films along this, and maybe picking something through. The only thing that didn't quite land for me was the supernatural element, which is when the film starts getting a bit silly, and some of the modes of death, like death by blender and then death by hair straightener. I don't know what that was.
A hair straightener in the face will kill you.
In the mouth, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was... I wonder whether it could have been a bit better had it been maybe, I don't know, a relative taken revenge, and whether the supernatural element didn't need to be in there and it could have been a bit more kind of revengey. I don't quite know. So maybe that could be something they could have legs. But yeah, they tend to produce a lot, which is good. And, you know, as we said, there is the higher end quality horror, and then there's just basically, you know, going for it with sequels.
Where do you sit on Blumhouse, James?
I'm a big fan. And a lot of them I find very scary. I mean, genuinely, when I saw Paranormal Activity, I couldn't sleep that night. And that's not normally something that happens to me with horror films. I enjoy them, but I don't necessarily get disturbed by them. Maybe I get disturbed watching them, but by the point I've left the cinema, then it's kind of over. But actually, Paranormal Activity really stuck with me. I didn't find this scary. It didn't actually detract from my enjoyment, because I think it was, I was, and it is very short, so 83 minutes. And in that 83 minutes, I was so overwhelmed by the technical achievement of it and enjoying that, and how, like Ben said, how the story evolves and unfolds in that running time, that actually the fact that I wasn't really scared by any of it wasn't a major problem for me. But I do think that might be why, as we said, it's not held up in the ranks of The Purge and things like that, which do have are genuinely more chilling and actually have a sort of social point to them as well. This I didn't, it just didn't scare me in any way. And also perhaps because it is so tight. And I do think with scares and with chills, you need a little bit of space around them, a bit of breathing space to give them some welly. And with Unfriended, it's so fast that it doesn't really have that. It doesn't, in a way, it couldn't be long, because I think we'd get bored with it if it was 100 minutes or 110 minutes. But at the same time, by being so short, I don't know if it really builds up the tension in a way that would creep you out. And that's one of the things I got from Paranormal Activity. I found it creepy because a lot of it is slow and quiet. And you never really get that slowness in Unfriended. It's just bang, 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 information overload, which is brilliant and intriguing and fascinating, and I loved it. I didn't, however, find it scary. And the ending, which is also seems to be a rip-off from Paranormal Activity, it's kind of one of those things, and this is a problem I have with a lot of maybe horror films or fantasy films, is how do you actually end them? When you come up with a conceit, and essentially the conceit of this ghost story is that this ghost can do anything, really. I mean, there's kind of nothing that it can't do. It has control over everything. It can be anywhere at any point doing anything. So how do you really end that satisfactorily? How do you reach a point where everything's tied up and you feel, okay, the story's over? Well, in this case, it just did it by killing off the last person and sort of
posting on Facebook.
yeah, and having the kind of creepy close up, but it, that I think that's just not necessarily a problem solely of Unfriended. I think that's a problem actually with a lot of horror films. It's great to come up with the idea, but how do you finish that idea? Where do you go with that idea? And I think that's one of the weaker points of Unfriended.
I think I agree with Helen in the kind of supernatural elements of this, because I think the setup was really tight and actually important. And from a social standpoint, this cyberbullying and like teen suicide is a really, really kind of salient point. But then to turn it up from like 5 to 255 and have like all the, like I said, a guy putting his hand in the blender, death by hair straightener. I mean, they're kind of scary and gory, which is probably what they were going for. But I think if it was like somehow they'd managed to, there was a disgruntled aunt or uncle who'd seen that video and found that it was all these guys involved in it and managed to kind of create that, I think that would have been a nice kind of way to do it, rather than, like you say, this ghost that can just be omnipotent or whatever that word is and just be everyone and enact revenge on everyone that exactly as they want to, is kind of like, really? It started off so well, I think. And I hadn't thought about it until you guys were saying it. I don't know.
I definitely think the revenge thing might have been a better execution for it. But then there's something kind of bizarre when you're watching it, that this ghost is like the Skype egg and like the username Billy227 and I when it's like, oh, Laura Harms is typing and you're like, oh, what's she gonna type, kind of thing. There's something quite entertaining in that, but not, as you say, particularly scary. And the flicking to unexplainedforums.net really kind of aged it, probably older than it actually is. Some of the deaths were a bit strange and it didn't quite work, but it is like the subject matter for them to kind of tackle it in that way was the scariest thing for me. That first video of like the suicide, where she basically shoots herself in the face, was just like, whoa, okay, we're going into that there. And the later sort of bits sort of cheapened that. So they started off really, really strong. And then by trying to, ghost it up, maybe lost some of the impact that it had slightly early on, which was a bit of a shame. Yeah.
I think that's kind of what Blumhouse does, though. And one thing I quite admire about them is that they really blend this like supernatural schlock Friday night, get your popcorn, come and see the film about the ghost that haunts the Skype chat, and at the same time tries to sneak in a little bit of social commentary. That's what they do with the Purge films as well, where it gives you enough social commentary that you're like, oh, this film is actually about something and it's in its own way has something to say, and at the same time is like, here's a bunch of people getting killed in gruesome ways, which is the reason why you've come to see this film. So we're going to draw you in with what you want and give you at least a bit of a message as you head out. Because I quite liked the ending, even though I agree with you guys that the ramp up of the supernatural elements wasn't massively scary. It didn't. I mean, I'm massively desensitized to horror stuff anyway, so none of it really stuck with me.
Another one's dead.
There they go. They all deserve to go. But the way that it ended in terms of the story revelation of realizing how integral Blaire was to the cyberbullying that sort of fed into Laura Barnes' suicide, that as a story revelation, and then the uploading of the video, and that this cycle of bullying and social media shaming continues, I thought actually that's the thing that kind of lingered with me, the thematic element of all of this happens because this cycle kind of continues. They bullied her, she died, then this conversation is happening that is still perpetuating them talking about her, and then the revenge perpetuates even further this sort of cycle of shaming and social horror.
I think the scary thing for me, thinking about it now, is that element of cyberbullying, which is obviously there, didn't. It's not. I watched it just thinking this is normal. Not it's right. Of course, it's not right. But I just felt, well, this is what happens online. And maybe when I watched it originally, I felt differently because it was several years ago. But the kind of the punch of something like The Purge, which is just this outrageous concept. That's why, or Get Out for that matter. That's why I think they have a real social conscience. But with this, I kind of forgot that it was even saying anything about society, because the way they behaved just felt entirely normalized. And I suppose that is scary in itself. But, it didn't really feel like they were doing anything that millions of people do anyway. They were just kind of behaving as kids do. Which I guess shows how desensitized I've become to how people behave on the internet. The revelation at the end made sense, but really she was the only one left, wasn't she? It was probably always going to be her, unless it was sort of, it just felt like it was involved all these people and no one else outside of that circle. And so they were all going to have a piece in the jigsaw, and she was the last one left. But I don't want to be down with it, because I genuinely really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it a lot more than the first time. And I really was wowed by how it told its story, how it achieved what it did. I thought it was a real, something really special. And actually, we should be talking about it a lot more, and we should be talking about it in the way that we talk about Paranormal Activity.
I think just before we head to the scores, I was just trying to recount the deaths, and the most eerie death was actually the lady, the girl they invited that they didn't really like, just to A, have a go, and B, Val was it, yeah, have a go, and B, kind of find out what was going on. And then you just see that she's like almost like rigor mortis, and you see the phone just like creeping across. I thought that was like one of the most effective things in the whole film, and just a super subtle thing there. What did you guys reckon? Was there any other deaths that you thought were like, oh shit?
Well, I mean, on that one, I loved that. I loved that sort of the way that it creates tension for you as a viewer, knowing what the online experience is like, knowing that it's full of delays, that people's screens freeze.
Yeah.
And so you're working out, has the screen frozen? And then that shot of the sort of phone buzzing along the desktop and realizing that it's not frozen, that she's frozen. Super smart. And I think it does a lot of good things as well. Like Helen was saying, in terms of when Laura is typing and you have to wait to see what that message is going to be. It derives this really organic tension from the online experience. Also waiting for the file to download, and you're sitting there waiting, watching the sort of download percentage increase to find out what this file is and what it's going to reveal. I thought it did that stuff really smartly. I have to say, I quite liked the hand in the blender. Maybe that makes me a sicko. I just thought that was quite it was so random and so where did the blender come from? Who knows? But it was gory and kind of horrible. And if you want to see something like flash on the screen for half a second, hand in a blender, it's worse in your mind than what you actually see. So I thought that was pretty effective as far as that one went.
And that dude, I think he was always going to be the hand in the blender guy, wasn't he? He was like the wacky best friend. He was sort of the cocky one. And
smokes loads of weed, got a blender in his room.
Exactly, yeah. And the hand in the blender was the more comical of the deaths. And so it felt right that it was for him. I think you always need to have one like that in a horror movie when the killer is picking off a number of different people. One of those deaths needs to be a bit sort of on the lighter side. And I loved that bit.
Well, let's head to the scores.
Hello, I'm Sam Pay.
And I'm Martin Zotz-Orstwick.
And together we host a show called Song by Song, where we deal with the music of Tom Waits. We've been going since 2015. Every week we talk about a new track. We've made our way through 15 seasons so far of his music.
And now we're going back to the early years. And if you haven't listened to Tom Waits before, it's not the growly stuff. It's not the stuff where he's hitting an automobile with a bone for percussion. It's a nice, easy way into his music.
If that sounds like something you would be interested in, you should check out our website, songbysongpodcast.com, or put Song by Song into your podcatcher of choice.
welcome to our Flixwatcher scoring. All of the scores are out of 5, and you may have decimal places if you wish. And we'll start with you, Ben, with your recommendability, please.
I'm going to go 4 for recommendability. If you like horror stuff, if you're interested in this kind of thing, if you liked Host, I do think a lot of what Host does, it does better than this. But I'd give it a 4. I would recommend this to people.
James?
I would also go for 4. It's not perfect. However, there's a novelty value to it. And now looking back on it, I think it captures a moment in time, a zeitgeist of what was it, 5 or 6 years ago now? Was it longer than that? But it's, if you wanted to look back on a time, and certainly in years to come, when we're even further into the future, I think if you wanted to see what were kids doing and how were they behaving and what was their social life like at a certain point in the noughties or teens or whenever it was made, I think it captures that really well, actually. And so I've got to applaud it for that invention and that snapshot of an era. So, 4 out of 5.
Helen?
Yeah, I'm also going to give it a 4. It's so short that even if you watched it, then you'd be like, well, that was all right. But I genuinely had more fun with it than I was expecting. And I'm not quite sold on the supernatural element, but there's so much going on for such a short runtime, and it's very entertaining and kind of like a fascinating insight into young people communicating. Some horror fans probably will say it's not quite gory enough and there's not enough scares in there, but it's kind of like a new breed of horror, so give it a go. It's really short. You'll have fun. I'm
going to go for 4 as well. I think I wasn't looking forward to it. I hadn't watched it for a particular reason because it sounded a bit shit, but it wasn't. And that's the caveat I'll say to people. It sounds a bit shit, but it's not. Give it a go. Just going with a light heart.
Kobe did message me saying, "Are you sure you didn't mean Searching, the John Cho one that everyone says is really good?" And I was like, that is really good, but that's not the one I meant. And I could feel you deflating in that moment. You're like, no, I wanted to watch Searching instead.
I do need to watch Searching now off the back of this.
I was just going to say, super brave for bringing something on that you haven't seen before as well, because most of the time it's only maybe once or twice when that's happened and someone's gone, yeah, I picked it because I hadn't seen it and now I'm really sorry. So it's a brave move.
Repeat viewing score, guys. Ben?
I'm going to go for a 2. Because I think I got everything that I needed from this film on the first time around. And I do think, as I keep banging on about, a lot of the things that this film does, Host is so good. Check it out. I know this is the Netflix podcast, but it's on Shudder, the like horror subscription channel. I'm so sorry, but it's flipping great. And you know what we were saying about that this is, 83 minutes and it gets in and it gets out. Host is like 55 minutes in and out, and it feels like a complete experience. And the supernatural side of it works super well. So I think partly because of that, I would return to that over Unfriended, but it's definitely worth that initial watch. So 2 for me on repeat viewing.
James?
I'll go 3 because it was a repeat viewing for me, even though I didn't realise it until it was 10 minutes in, and then when I did realise it, I thought, well, I'm actually enjoying this significantly more. Now, admittedly, there were several years between viewings, and I'm not saying I would want to watch it again next week, but I think I'm the only one here for whom it was a repeat viewing. However big a gap it was between the first time I saw it and the second time I saw it, I can say that I enjoyed it more the second time. So I'll have to go 3. But I don't know if it's going to bear up to many more viewings than those 2.
Helen?
Yeah, I'm unlikely to go back to this, but I am intrigued now more so about Host. And what was the other one? Searching, is it called?
Yeah. Okay. Searching is on Netflix as we record this.
Okay, yeah. So sorry, Unfriended. I'm going to give you a 1 and use my 83 minutes to invest in another one of the genre.
I'm going to go for 0.75. I think I got everything I needed from this the first time. And to be honest, it's great because it's opened my eyes to a concept which could work. And I think especially recording during a pandemic, it's really good to see interesting ways of creating new material that's interesting. And, one of my favourite TV shows of this past few months is Staged, which is Michael Sheen and David Tennant screen lifing, and it's fucking hilarious. It's brilliant. So it does go to show this kind of concept can work, and I don't think I'll revisit this. But kudos to them for like bringing in a new genre. Small screen score. I imagine this to be quite high. Ben?
I'm going to go 5, because if any film was designed to be seen on a home screen, it's this. I watched it on my TV, and I kind of wish I'd watched it on my laptop or on my phone. It's literally perfect for that. Like, I wouldn't say it's a 5-star film, but if you're going by purely what is a good small screen experience, it's got to be this, right? The way that especially as Helen was saying, if you watch it on your laptop, it primes you as you're like the 6th person on the Skype chat. You are the extra spectre watching it all unfold. And that is an experience that you wouldn't get watching this in the cinema. So yeah, I don't know what more it could do to be worthwhile as a home viewing. I'm going to go 5.
James?
4.5. Yeah, I mean, I did see it on the cinema, and then I watched it on my iPad, and it was significantly better on the iPad. So I think that speaks for itself. So yeah, I might not go for the perfect score, but 4.5 for small screen experience.
Helen?
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 5 as well. For the extra kind of element, like with your headphones. So, you know, you've got to have your ears in, and you just get that full on laptop in the moment. It's almost like VR horror, sort of.
Engagement score, Ben?
I'm going to say 4 for this, because I was really engaged the whole way through it. Like I said, I thought it did a really good job unfurling the story, of dishing out the revelations in a really innovative way. And I think it's not really until the end of the film that you get the full picture of the backstory of this whole kind of social cycle and how it began. So I'm going to say 4, because if you'd have paused it halfway through, I would have been like, what are you doing? I was in the middle of watching that.
James?
Yeah, another 4. I mentioned earlier that I feel it wasn't as scary as I'd hoped, and perhaps that is because it felt a little too speedy in certain parts. And personally, I get more creeped out by stillness and slowness, and there isn't a lot of that in this film. But having said that, you know, I was totally gripped the whole way through because it is, you know, a short movie that gets to the point and tells the story efficiently. And right, like I said right at the beginning, you know, to tell this story in this way is incredibly creative and difficult to plan. I can't even imagine how, you know, they did sort of go through it. And it feels very natural. You know, none of the actors feel like they're really performing. It totally feels realistic, as if it is a real Skype chat. So I think to pull it off, amazing. And to keep us gripped, amazing. So 4 out of 5.
I was thinking, I was trying to work out where the costs. I didn't do any research into this, so I don't know. Maybe you can tell me how much this costs to make. But I thought the cost must be going into the licensing of using Facebook and like Skype's names. That must have been a big chunk of it, because none of the actors were well known. And I don't know. It just seemed like, even though it might be quite difficult to put together, the production cost will be quite low, because everything was grainy. You didn't need to have a high production set value, did you, at all? So I can see why like Blumhouse put their money into something like this. It must cost like £2 million less than that. $2 million.
Super short recording time as well, filming time, and also, you know, you don't have to worry about sets, because presumably you're filming everything through the screens to get the authenticity.
And it was an investment for them as well, basically, because so the producer who kind of links this with searching and other things, a Russian filmmaker called Timur Bekmambetov. He has basically patented this technology to do these kind of screen life films, which is how you got Searching and Unfriended Dark Web. So they have the technology now. They were sort of feeling it out with this film, I think, and by the end of it, they had the tools to do it that they can apply to more films in the future. So it was, I guess, an experiment and investment in that sense.
So was it actually recorded via computer screen, and then because I thought they might have recorded using proper cameras and then like...
Yeah, it'll all be in the editing and the compositing. I'm sure they will have shot it, but especially because one of my flaws with the film is the sheer amount of the chat breaking up and the blockiness of the video, which is fake glitching. That's not a sort of authentic computer glitching. That's an effect they've added. So I'm sure they will have filmed it all kind of based on normally added all the effects and then blended it in the edit with this software that they developed basically to make it look like an authentic computer screen, which is really smart. I imagine a huge amount of it is basically animation. It's like an animation live action hybrid in its own way.
It's interesting that they've got this software, because I'm wondering, and I know Host isn't one of their films, so that's a slightly removed thing, but they've only done 3 or 4 of these films, and how much more they can do with that. I mean, I think it's an amazing thing that they've achieved, but I'm not so sure if it's got legs, where else you can go with it, really.
I genuinely want a rom-com. They've used it for loads of horror and thrillery stuff. Give us a rom-com. People falling in love over Zoom or something could be super sweet if they do it properly.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, we didn't have a found footage rom-com either, did we?
Helen, engagement score?
Yeah, so I'm going to go 4 as well. It's not very scary, I would say that. So it didn't kind of keep me on the edge of my seat, but, it's so short and it just zips along so fast that, 4. I'm
going to go for 5 here. I was genuinely like, oh, okay, I didn't know what to expect from this kind of type of film, so I'm going to settle in. It did lose me at the end, but I was with it all the way through to the end. But I'm not going to revisit it, so it had me once. And that gives us an overall score of 3.70313, which, based on my thoughts to Ben, and Helen sent me a WhatsApp going, oh my God, it's got 5.5 on IMDb. That's really poor. It's a lot better than we thought going into the recording. So, let's head to Twitter. Just as a reminder, guys, thank you very much for listening. But if you do follow us on Twitter, we are Flixwatcher Pod. Every time we go into recording, we put a little shout out to say, in this case, we're reviewing Unfriended with James King Movies and at Ben S. Travis. Have you seen it? Give us your thoughts and a score out of 5 for an on-air shout out. And we had quite an unexpected amount of comments in this. Ben, can you read out one of the comments that have been left?
So Liam H. Dempsey says it's an ingenious psychological horror which offers an impressively compelling commentary on social media, public shaming and cyberbullying. That's a lot of what we said as well. It drops the ball somewhat in its final minutes, but in general it was refreshingly unique for the time. 4 stars. That tallies so closely to what we thought.
Absolutely. James.
Nice one, Liam.
Do you want to take the next one?
Yeah, this is from Movie Reviews in 20 Qs podcast. A decent film for about 95% of its runtime, but like many a horror film, the wheels come off at the end a bit. Worth the watch for horror fans, 3 stars.
What's slightly different to what we said? Helen was saying that horror fans might not like this so much. Helen, do you want to take the next one?
So this one's from the Contrarians. I could be wrong, but I don't think that just screens and nothing but screens genre has overplayed itself the way found footage did so soon after bursting onto the scene. I love the inventiveness of this one and its sequel, even if it's far from plausible. 4 stars.
Nice. That's on one of the ones that retweeted rather than added to the list. Ben, do you want to say the next one that you can see?
Yes. So what were they thinking? Said, I didn't mind it at all. Innovative style and kept it short enough. 3.5 stars. Nice and succinct.
I didn't mind it at all.
Mind it at all. I didn't mind it. It was fine.
James.
This is from Jess Screen. Unfriended and then Host on Shudder. However, watch Host second, as it is better in every conceivable way.
And then these were replying to you, Ben. So this is from Jenny. I really like Unfriended, a rare film that 100% works better on a small screen or laptop than in a cinema.
Yes, which is what we said. And do you want to say the last one, Helen, because you got it in front of you?
Yep, so the last one is from Ben Murray Holmes. Such an underrated film. The build-up of suspense as you just watch the screen is crazy. Love the sequel too.
Are we going to go watch the sequel?
Is it on Netflix?
I will.
It's
yeah, it's on Netflix, Unfriended Dark Web. It's like, and I think they've done it in an anthology style, so it's different characters, obviously different setup, just using a similar sort of gimmick, but on the dark web, spooky.
I might watch it I think I'm going to go for searching first, and then Host, and then maybe come back to this if I haven't been tied out by this genre.
Unless someone might pick it before then, we don't know.
Well, true. We know whoever picked, how the film choices go, we never know. But thank you very much, James and Ben. Can you sign off by telling us where we can find you online? And we'll say goodbye to the listeners.
You can find me at Ben S. Travis on Twitter. And you can hear me occasionally on the Empire podcast and the Empire podcast spoiler specials. And you can read my stuff at empireonline.com.
James.
I'm at James King Movies on Twitter and Instagram and on Radio 2.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks for coming on.
Bye.
Enjoyed this episode of Flixwatcher podcast? Why not leave us a 5-star review on iTunes? You can also follow us at FlixWatcherPod on Twitter, and we're at FlixWatcher on Instagram. Thanks as always to the mighty people for their mighty, mighty tunes, and Ben from Rockwood Audio for his awesome editing skills. If you're looking to get your podcast edited as sweet as this, get in touch with Ben, and that's Rockwood, ROKK Wood Audio. Tell them Flixwatcher sent you.
You just heard a Stripped Media production.